Hello and welcome to episode 26 of MMO Weekly, presented as always by MetsmerizedOnline.com. I'm your host, Sal Manzo, along with my co-host and MMO executive editor, Mike Mayer. And Mike, I think there was some pretty important things that happened the last few days with the Mets. Justin Verlander is now a New York Met. Jacob deGrom is not. I just want to get your thoughts kind of initially. We'll start with the Verlander news. Just your thoughts on the reigning AL Cy Young Award winner, signing with Queens.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you can sign a Cy Young winner, pretty good. That's a pretty good thing. I know the questions with Scherzer when they gave him the deal, and now after what he kind of did at the end of last season or didn't do at the end of last season, the questions are going to be age with Verlander and Scherzer at the top of the rotation. You're talking to guys that are going to be 38 and 40 pitching next year, but there are also two guys that pitched really well in 2022. I mean, Scherzer, before kind of the bad start, two of the bad starts he had towards the end of the year, and including the wild card game, he was great. I mean, ERA wise, that was one of the best seasons he's had in his career. And Verlander, as you mentioned, won the Cy Young, pitched 175 innings. It's going to say 40 on the back of his baseball card, but nothing he did last year made you think he was 39. And like we've talked about kind of before, is there's risk to almost any pitcher that you're going to talk about. The way that essentially every pitcher either goes through Tommy John or some sort of injury that puts them on the shelf for a couple years or a year. Carlos Rendon has had his fair share of injuries. Obviously, he's a much younger pitcher, but over a 6-7 year span, which is the deal that he's looking at getting, there's a good chance that he's going to miss some time in there too. So I think you kind of have to just project out what you think these guys are going to pitch. And if you can get Verlander for 150 innings each of those 2 years, I mean, it's going to be tough to imagine him being bad. I mean, he hasn't been bad in a very long time. When he's been healthy, he's just pitched good. And obviously 2 years, 86 million jumps out at you. It's essentially the same value per year that Scherzer got, which makes sense. I mean, similar type pitchers, obviously talent-wise and age when they signed him. And then the third year would vest if Verlander pitches 140 innings in the last year, and that would vest at 35 million. And I mean, 35 million, again, that's a lot for a guy that would be pitching at that age, but that means he was healthy. So that could be a nice gift for the Mets to be able to get him for that third year. And then I think you got to kind of really compare the two, right? I mean, so you got Jacob deGrom, who got 5,185, which could turn into 6,222, versus Verlander at 286, that could turn into 3,121, sorry. And so I think if you're the GM, if I'm the GM, I think I'm taking Verlander. For a lot of reasons. I like short-term risk. Verlander at 2 years, even at his age, to me, is a better risk than it is for deGrom. So I like that short-term risk. And I also like the fact that Verlander, I mean, even last year, pitching 175 innings last year, that's more than deGrom has pitched the last 3 years. deGrom just hasn't pitched enough in the last 3 years for me to – it's tough to get on the Mets for not signing him to that deal, or to match it at least. It kind of sounded like the Mets were kind of really like to have been around what they gave Scherzer, essentially is where they wanted to kind of cap it. But for me, that's how I really break it down, is which one of those deals do you think looks better at the end of it? And I think deGrom probably has the bigger upside there and has potential to give you, obviously, with a 5-year deal, potential to give you more value out of that deal. But I think for what the Mets are trying to do this offseason and in the future, I think I would choose the Verlander deal out of those two.
Interesting. And, it's a lot of layers to this, right? We're going to delve into the deGrom stuff more, but, I can't fault either side there. I can't fault deGrom for taking that sort of deal. And I also can't blame the Mets for in not investing for those 5 years and what Texas offered. I think it would have been probably not the best move. Baseball wise, considering how, much time deGrom has, missed the last couple of years and hasn't really pitched that much, which you touched on. But I am in a little bit different camp as far as when I'm comparing the two pitchers of Verlander and deGrom. Personally, I would have rathered a Jacob deGrom. He's 5 years younger. I know he hasn't pitched the last couple of years, but, just the way that contract is, I would bet more so personally that he would, right that ship and get back to pitching close to, the innings and the pitcher that he was. I'm very excited about Justin Verlander. I think from a Mets perspective, I think this is another example of the new regime and how this team operates. A 2-time Cy Young Award winner walks out the door, and 2 days later, you replace him with a 3-time Cy Young Award winner. So from that regard, I think the Mets are doing great there as far as, putting their money where their mouth is to try and win. I'm just worried just with his age and, he missed the last 2 years with Tommy John and, he hadn't pitched that much into, in 2022, the last 2 years combined, he missed 2 years with Tommy John. I just worried his age, like, where's the cliff? Like, when's that going to happen? And I worry a bit that that's going to happen here. I would have personally liked the deal a lot more if it was even a $45 million 1-year deal. I would have really thrown something crazy at him for a year and done the vesting option, let's say, for 2. The third year scares me a bit. I know, obviously that's more of if he pitches well and they can bring him back. But there's a lot of, to me, fragility at the top of the rotation. Now you have, obviously Verlander and now Scherzer, and Scherzer, you can pencil in for missing a month every year. Especially that's not going to, get any less as he gets older at this point. I think that's just something you accept. And with his pedigree and when he does pitch, he's, phenomenal outside of what happened this year, his last 2 starts, whatever. And Verlander, I do worry about the same thing. So I guess my next question is, before we delve into deGrom and stuff like that, even with the Verlander signing, and we've talked about Sanya and other pitchers, you would think that in general, they're going to need just starting rotation depth. And I'm not talking not even another frontline starter, but guys like Trevor Williams. They have Carlos Carrasco back, but pitchers more on the back end that eventually when these kind of, horses need a break or something breaks down for a little while, that the Mets aren't going to be, kind of totally screwed without a plan B. I just kind of want to get your thoughts there a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, the Mets are still very interested in the next tier market, which is Kodai Senga, Chris Bassett, Jameson Tyone, Andrew Haney's kind of in the next level a little bit. The Mets are still very interested, I think, of that group. And I mean, you can throw like Taijuan Walker and a couple of other guys in there, Jose Quintana, maybe the next level. The Mets are, I would bet that the Mets sign one of those 7 pitchers I just mentioned, or someone similar to that. Right. So, I mean, whoever of that group is, you're really looking at, that's the 3 starter, because Scherzer and Verlander are the 1, 2, right, and Carrasco's your 4, and one of those guys your 3. And then, yeah, I do think they would like to, bring Trevor Williams back, or someone like Trevor Williams that can start games if need be, or pitch in the bullpen. I do think, and I think I'm at fault with this too, obviously the Mets need, in a perfect world, you would like to sign 2 more starters. But I do think we've kind of overlooked David Peterson a little bit, and just how well he pitched last year. I think David Peterson pretty much showed you that he's a big league starter and a fairly decent one. I mean, he's pitched as a big league starter for a couple seasons now, and looked perfectly fine as a back end starter. So I wouldn't be too worried if you end up having David Peterson being your opening day number 5. I mean, I would bet he's better than a good portion of Major League Baseball's number 5s. Obviously, you still want to have that depth like you're talking about, even if he's the 5, if you have Trevor Williams or someone like Trevor Williams, to have that depth. I think that's a great idea. And yeah, you can never have enough starting pitchers starting pitching depth, like I said, I think they're going to get one of those guys that you see as like a number 3 starter. I don't think whether it's Peterson, Carrasco, McGill, Lucchesi, I don't think they want any of those guys to be in that 3rd spot. So ideally, they would get someone that's a 3 or has the upside of a 3. And I think that could get done relatively quickly, because one thing they've done with losing deGrom and adding Verlander is that they've kind of expedited the starting pitching market now.
Right.
I mean, teams that were hoping to get deGrom or Verlander have missed out. And now they're going to be looking for pitching. So I think we're going to kind of see the next domino, Rodon, someone cough up a 7-year deal for him. And then I think that's just where the dominoes are all down, and it's ready for all these other tiered pitchers to sign. And I think that's smart. I mean, I don't think anyone before the offseason would have really predicted that deGrom was going to get $185. And Verlander got $43 million a year. There's a lot of money in pitching. I mean, Rafael Montero got 3 years, $34 million. Diaz set the record for a reliever. I think these guys are good pitchers. I mean, deGrom, Verlander, obviously going to Hall of Fame. Diaz is arguably the best closer in baseball. But I think some fans are going to be surprised when they see the numbers for some of these guys like Tyone and Haney. But that's where we're headed. I mean, look at what these guys are getting. And teams are always desperate for pitching.
Right.
So, I mean, Rodon's going to get 7 years, close to $200 million likely. Tyone's going to get probably 4 years, and it's going to be a good chunk of change, like a John Gray deal or whatever.
Right.
These guys are going to get paid, and as the Mets keep on putting out money, you kind of just got to be aware of, well, how much more do they have to spend, which we'll kind of get into more when we talk about Brandon Nimmo and the other options. But yeah, I think the Mets are going to continue adding pitching. I mean, Billy Epler's talked about it a lot. The fans know it. Everyone knows it, that the Mets need pitching depth and pitching strength. So I would expect them to continue to be aggressive at the winter meetings when it comes to pitching.
Yeah, I mean, they have no choice, like you said, on the starter side and the reliever side, and outside of now Diaz and Drew Smith, they have a lot of key pieces in the bullpen as well. You brought up Tyone, you brought up Heaney. It's funny hearing these names and just kind of the money that's being projected. And obviously, seeing the ground what Verlander got, and what Rondon's probably going to get. It's just right place, right time market, right? It's just because it's not a huge starting pitching market, not very deep. So guys like that are really going to rake it in. But would I be excited and really happy if Andrew Heaney was the number 3 starter for 4 years, 80 mil, whatever, the higher numbers are going to be for that kind of guy? Not really, right? Tyone, he's had his injury problems. He pitched for the Yankees. Obviously, maybe you think he can handle New York, whatever, but not someone I'm super keen on them, giving a bigger deal to. But it's the necessity of where they're at. It's the necessity of, this is a win now team. Cohen's made it clear. I'll pose the question quickly, and we'll probably do it a million times, that I just wonder if he regrets coming in and going all in the way he did. Because eventually these contracts, with older guys, you don't want to be the 2012 Angels. You know what I'm saying? I worry that I'm just, something I think about now with everything going on, and, the NL East is stacked. We'll get to the Trey Turner signing. Obviously, Braves won the World Series in 21. Phillies just went to the World Series. The NL East is arguably the most competitive division, or toughest division in all baseball. And, with a roster like this that's been so depleted, I wonder if they're going to be able to keep up. And obviously they could do whatever they can to. But, that'll be interesting to see. You brought up Nimmo. We can get to that in a second, but I just feel like we can't not talk Verlander without deGrom now. I think they're just going to be linked, kind of however long Justin Verlander is going to be a Met and all that kind of stuff. I think what's jumped out to me just from stuff reading, from today and over the weekend, it sounded like Verlander and Steve Cohen really hit it off, like they formed a relationship. And that sounds like that was not something. Now, again, deGrom leaves, things get leaked, right? Sour blood, whatever. But it doesn't sound like deGrom got there was not that effort between the two of them or that kind of relationship. And in general, the stories coming out about deGrom now, just how he didn't seem very involved with the team. He was kind of there, punched his time card, did his thing, collect his paycheck, pitched that day, and then was kind of out. Are you surprised about any of that? Just hearing this stuff kind of about deGrom, the way he kind of left and how it was the last year? Or, do you think that the writing was pretty much on the wall all year with how he's, kind of, spoke, and you're not that surprised that he left? Money aside, that obviously the contract is one thing, but just in general, like, demeanor wise, I'm just wondering if, you were surprised at that.
Well, to touch on like one thing about like deGrom being around the team and stuff like that, you have to realize this is a guy that's missed a large portion of 2 years. So he literally wasn't around the team very often to make those connections, make those bonds with maybe the different coaches, managers. I mean, you have to remember in those 2 years, there's a lot of turnover too, when it was players, coaches. So look, there's some truth to a lot of stuff that's being said about deGrom, whether it's not particularly like playing in New York, or it's different things about vaccination status, different stuff that we can delve into if we want to. But I think the reality is that just you have to realize that this was probably going to happen anyways. Like, regardless of all of that other stuff, deGrom, there's a good chance that Grom was going to leave regardless. I mean, someone was going to throw a big time contract at him. Just crazy money. We knew the Rangers were going to throw crazy money at a pitcher. It just happened to be deGrom. And I think, and I also, I mean, we go back to spring training. I don't think you can be too surprised that deGrom's leaving, because the first time he spoke this year to anyone, he said, "I'm opting out." And you can't blame him. The guy's 33 and never hit free agency.
Right.
And at some point as a player, I mean, at 33, you're like, wow, if I don't hit free agency now, am I ever going to hit free agency? And I don't want to take away from the player. I mean, that's the player's right to hit free agency. It's their right to go out and seek that big contract. And obviously that was a very good one for him. There are some stuff like with deGrom. Obviously, he isn't a huge fan of New York. I don't think that's a big surprise. I don't think if you're reading between the lines, I mean, I don't think he's ever really enjoyed talking to the media that much. Right. And obviously, the media is a big part of playing in New York. I mean, there's no hiding that. I mean, you can even see Max Scherzer get annoyed with questions at some point in the year. Chris Bassett had some stuff. I mean, that's not everyone's going to enjoy that. Right. And that's fair. And that's going to happen. And I can't really, I mean, there's no way to blame him for what he did. I don't like Mets fans kind of seeing them rip him down. In the end, 10 years from now, depending on what happens, obviously weird things can happen, but this is a guy that potentially is going to get his number retired for the Mets. He's going to come back to Old Timers Day. He's going to have his place in the Mets Hall of Fame. I mean, this is arguably the second best pitcher in Mets history. So it stings right now, and there's a lot of little pieces that make it sting more. But in baseball circles, this was kind of one of those things where they were like, deGrom kind of wants to at least test the market, and there's a good chance that he's going to leave. I mean, in the long run, I guess from a Mets standpoint, you're glad that like the Braves never really got involved, or the Phillies never really got involved, so that he's not in the NL East. And like we were talking about, just from a contract standpoint, I just, that's tough to match that deal at 5 years, $185 million, for not, because you're taking a risk on the talent, which, hey, if you want to win like the Rangers want to win right now, it's tough to fault them, because they're in a position too, like the Mets are, where they've already put a lot of money into Simeon and Seager, and they need to win, and pitching has been the big issue for them. So it's tough to fault them, but I don't it's tough to fault the Mets too, like you mentioned, for matching that type of deal. Yeah, I mean, to kind of put a bow on the deGrom thing, I mean, basically the last time I talked to someone, I was like, I would give it like 50-50 that he stays with the Mets, and leaves with the Mets. And I think that really changed once deGrom said, I'm opting out. I mean, that was him telling the Mets that, hey, I'm not going to talk extension. I'm going to hit free agency. This is what's going to happen. I think maybe Mets fans got hopeful after he was out for so long that he wasn't going to opt out because he just hadn't pitched enough to earn a contract.
Right.
The upside's just so insane with deGrom. I mean, we saw it for this year. I mean, I don't think his ERA really tells the story of how well he pitched for the Mets this year. And he came up in the biggest, arguably one of the biggest games they needed all year. He came up and won the wild card game. So, yeah,
5 innings, I mean, 5 innings, 3 runs, 90 pitches. Yeah, sure. He pitched good.
It was 6-2. It was 6-2.
Was it 6-2? I thought it was 5-3. But
nope, 6-2.
You know, I listen. Thank you for the memories. 18 and 19, winning those 2 Cy Youngs, the best pitcher I've ever seen in my life. I'll always say that. He's the best pitcher I got to watch every 5 days of my life. Probably won't ever change. Yeah. But good luck in Texas. Good luck finishing 3rd place behind the Mariners and the Rangers every year, 20 games under 500. You know, I found Bochy's press conference a little comical, a little bit, when he said, you know, what sold him with deGrom, he said he talked to him on the Zoom meeting during the interviews, and he said he was impressed with deGrom's commitment to winning and a winning organization. Now, Mike, I'm not a big math guy. You know, the numbers, a little dyslexia in there. But going from 101 win team to a 68 win team, I don't know if that dictates as winning at all costs. I don't know. It's fine. Now I know they wanted, again, a lot of money to burn. There's always one desperate owner. They needed a pitching staff that's going to get anchored. And I would assume that they hope he can anchor it. So in a couple of years, when Leiter and Rocker are ready to roll, that they kind of have a big 3 up there. I get all that. But you know, I hope it works for him. It's the best place scenario. He's not with the Braves. He's not with the Dodgers. Not with the Yankees.
So let's talk about that for a second because of the names you just mentioned. I know Mets fans don't want to really think about it right now, but can you imagine Jacob deGrom and Kumar Rocker in the same rotation? Guys that deGrom, who you thought was going to retire Met, and Kumar Rocker, who was technically a Met when they drafted him, never signed him. That would be something just bizarre. And I mean, then even Leiter, who's the son of a former Met.
Yeah.
So just to see that trio at the top, potentially at the top of the rotation, hopefully the Mets have won a couple of rings by then. Correct. And that'll just make it fun for Mets fans. Be like, oh, hey, look at what they're doing. That's fun. But we're the team that's winning. So,
and
yeah, I think that's kind of wild. That was one of the first things I thought about because I have a weird brain is like deGrom and Rocker. Like, oh, wow, that's kind of weird.
Very, very Mets too, of course. But listen, you know, it's one of those things where I think come May, teams 10 games over 500, they're playing well. No one's going to remember deGrom. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I just winning cures everything, right? And if the Mets are still good, that's what matters ultimately. You hit the nail on the head. You know, have fun with, you know, if you're pitching with Rocker and whatever. The Mets have won a couple of World Series by then. Then like it's fine. It's all gravy. You know, it's just
it'll be in Mets fans' heads August 28th, 29th, and 30th when deGrom comes to Citi Field. And it'll be interesting. I think the reaction is really going to depend, and I think this is kind of weird.
How the Mets are doing.
I think it depends on how the Mets are doing. Yeah,
absolutely.
If the Mets are in first place, he's going to get cheered more cheered than if the Rangers are in first place and the Mets rotation's been bad or something like that, and the Mets are in third place behind the Phillies and Braves. I think it's which is kind of weird because that doesn't change anything that's happened,
right?
Or how it's happened. But I do think that'll kind of play into it. And obviously by that time you have some sense of like if you're going to have a chance for the playoffs by late August for both of those teams. So it'll definitely be interesting to see. And like when I tweeted about that series happening, I think probably 50% of the reaction was, well, it won't matter because deGrom will be on the injured list by then.
I saw that little chuckle, funny because it's maybe true, but listen, he should, I'm sure the ovation will be 50-50 no matter what. He'll get a nice tribute video, which he greatly deserves. He was tremendous when he was here. It's just, I think everyone should look at his free agency and look that this is pro sports now, right? The people of get your number retired, you're a statue like Seaver, one team your whole career. Players don't want that. I don't think that's a bigger thing to players as it once was. Not diminishing one way or another, but I think at this point, players want what is the best situation for them. And 9 times out of 10, that's who's going to pay me the most, right? That they're not playing for free. We get all that. But Aaron Judge is probably a perfect example. I don't, whatever happens with him, right? If he goes elsewhere, it's the same kind of thing. But I think it's, players aren't as don't feel that that obligation if they've been really successful to start out with a team to just stay with them just because. I think players now are set on kind of forging their own path. So in that respect, it's not that surprising, but it's still going to be weird to see him in another jersey. That's for sure.
Oh, it is. And kind of like one last final thing on that is the Mets never really. I mean, if he ends up signing, he signed for 5 years, 185 million. And they're offering around 3 years, 120 million. That's not really in the same ballpark.
Right.
It's just not. I mean, 5 years with an option for a 6th year is quite different than what the Mets were reportedly offering.
Right. And any other team apparently was not offering anywhere. It was like 3 years max.
Yeah.
The Rangers were the only ones offering that kind of money and that kind of language.
Yeah. I mean, that was kind of what was expected was going into this. Is that's kind of where it was. And that's where we ultimately get into the situation where the reports are like, well, he didn't go to back to the Mets. He didn't need to go back to the Mets.
Right.
He knew what the Mets were offering. And that's the same thing. Cashman was just talking recently, and he's like, well, I don't expect Judge to come back to me to match my offer either, because we've given that's what you do when you're having this conversation. You're not trying to lowball guys. Well, unless you're the Red Sox and trying to extend some of your homegrown talent. But these guys aren't trying to lowball them in conversations. They're giving them a good idea of what they're going to offer them. So and it is, like you said, it's a different time in sports where big superstars go to other franchises. It happens. It just happens. It like you said, it could very well happen with Aaron Judge coming off of setting the American League home run record. He very well could go to the Giants.
I'm not saying I want to see that happen because I'm a journalist that has no bias. But maybe that'll happen. That'll be pretty good. Yeah, man, and with social media and the internet, you could be a megastar anywhere. John Morant's a megastar in the NBA in Memphis, Tennessee. You know what I mean? I'm biased being a New Yorker. I always feel like the New York Pulse, right? It's bigger than anything. But the way things are now, you could be a star no matter what. You got an iPhone, you got a cell phone, you can, market yourself and be a star anywhere. So, we could put a bow on it. We wish him the best, except if you pitch against the Mets. And still wish you well if you pitch against the Yankees and teams that we don't like. So other than that, do well, be well there. But it's time to move on, right? Time for the Mets obviously moved on with Verlander, so we got to all try and now do the same. Spin Zone, deGrom jerseys on sale, Marshall's TJ Maxx the next few months. I'm excited for that. So if there's any silver lining, I'll get myself a deGrom jersey finally. But we'll transition from there to another free agent. You mentioned Nimmo a little bit before. I just wanted to touch on him and anything you're hearing about lately about his market, kind of where the Mets stand. I know I heard Andrew Benintendi floated around earlier today that the Mets are looking into as a possible Nimmo replacement because his market's so robust. But I just want to hear what you're hearing on the latest from Nimmo.
Well, I mean, honestly, the Benintendi thing and where it came from, a source that's typically sourced straight from the Mets front office, that definitely felt like a report that was trying to put pressure on Nimmo.
Right.
I mean, Benintendi had a fine year last year, posted good on base, good average, didn't show any power whatsoever. I think So if you're signing Benintendi, he's going to play one of the corner outfield spots, and then Marte is going to play center. So your outfield would be Canna, Marte, and Benintendi, and that's
not going to cut it.
I mean, it's not bad. It's just extremely mediocre on defense and on offense. And there's just not enough pop there for your outfield. I don't like Benintendi as an option for the Mets, regardless of what happens with Nimmo. So I would.
Would you rather a Conforto reunion over a Benintendi signing?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I just think there's way too much. I was talking to actually my brother about it today about Conforto, and honestly, I like Conforto better than a lot of the other options just because he's one of the best bets for surplus value from this free agency. I mean, assuming he's healthy, which they're saying they are, and obviously teams are going to check out his medicals and go all through that. If he's healthy, because of him missing a year, he's only going to get 1 or 2 years, and it's going to be a pretty like $12-15 million a year. That there's almost zero risk in today's market at 2 years, 30 million. And there's a ton of potential for a surplus value there from Michael Conforto. Look, we know that he can play in New York. We've seen that on the biggest stage. We know that he's a solid defender. We know that with the shift going the way it is and him being a hard pull side hitter on the infield, that's going to help him a little bit. And we also know that Citi Field in right center field is coming in a little bit. So I know the Mets would like to add a lefty or at least replace Nimmo with a lefty. And I think out of those two, I would rather have Conforto over Benintendi. To kind of get back to Nimmo, look, it's a robust market. There's 2 teams vying for Judge that we know of. And one of those, whoever misses out on them, is going to want Nimmo. And they're just added to the list of 8 or 9 other teams that want Nimmo. There's no center field market. It's him, then Cody Bellinger, who hasn't hit in 2 years, and Kevin Kiermaier, who's never hit and been injured the last couple of years. So Nimmo's going to get up there. The more people I talked to, one number I heard today was like 5 years, 140 million was their guess of what he's going to get, or potentially a 6th year. And you're looking at 106 year, 165 million, getting up into that range. I know the Mets, Epler said it today that they're still having dialogue with Nimmo. I think they certainly do have interest there because of what we're talking about now and what we've mentioned a lot is that there's just no good options outside of him. Obviously, if you want to get a center fielder, I think Bellinger's pretty clearly the second best option on the free agent market. There, you're at least going to get really good defense.
Right.
You hope you can get some changes in his offense. Outside of that, you got to talk about the trade market. We know that Brian Reynolds from the Pirates has requested a trade. We don't know if the Pirates are going to go along with that request. We're talking about a 3-4 win outfielder every year that's signed pretty cheaply for the next 3 years, switching outfielder, center fielder. Look, teams are already lining up for him. They already said the Yankees are going to have interest. The Blue Jays have interest. The Mets miss out on Nimmo. I'd be shocked if they didn't have interest. This is a guy that's going to get a pretty good prospect haul for him, but the Mets miss out on Nimmo. They kind of have to go that route. I think they have to, not necessarily Reynolds, but they have to go a trade route potentially. The Diamondbacks are another team that's talked about. They might make some of their guys available. They have Dalton Varsho, which I think is a pretty nice player, can play center and catcher. Pretty solid offensive player. I think that might be a guy the Mets would take a look at too. Because I know Epler has said they would be comfortable moving Marte to center, but I just don't see you moved him to right field, in part because his defensive skills were declining.
And you wanted to maximize his health, which they did. He was a tremendous right fielder. If it's not broke, don't fix it. Go get a center fielder.
And he's going to be 34 coming off a core surgery. I just don't. I think that's pretty obvious that that's less than ideal to have him. And I mean, maybe you would be more so willing to do it if it was for someone better than Andrew Benintendi or Mitch Haniger or any other of lists of these corner outfielders. Just there's not a good corner outfield market either, and we haven't really heard any like trade options in that aspect either of guys that are on the market. So I don't have a good idea of where Nimmo's going to land right now. I don't think anyone does, just because there's so many teams involved. And teams are kind of waiting to see what's going to happen with Judge. So I think I do think it's interesting that Nimmo is at the meetings. That's kind of unusual. You don't see a ton of top free agents go there in person to meet with teams. So that's interesting. You have to imagine that he's going to sit down with the Mets at some point while he's there. Epler didn't mention that happened today, but with him being there, that kind of makes me feel like Nimmo would like to make a decision fairly soon, meet with teams so that he can kind of get a better understanding and kind of get this is what we're going to offer you. And that I think that's a good idea. And I mean, some of these players, I know they don't want any of this to stretch out any farther, especially, I mean, guys changing, not to bring back up deGrom, but this is a guy that lives in Florida. So he loved the fact that he was spring training in Florida. And now this is a guy that's going out to move into Texas and spring training out there. So that, I mean, just using him as an example, that's a big shift for a family. So for players that know that that's possible, like Nimmo potentially signing with the Seattle Mariners, like that's obviously something you would like to know sooner in the offseason if you can, to get settled before you go into spring training. So I do think we will see something on Nimmo in the next weekish, and I think the Mets are going to be involved, and I think they're going to bid pretty heavily for Nimmo.
As they should. He's someone we know that can handle New York. He likes playing in New York. He's an elite leadoff hitter, gets on base on elite clip, and turned himself into a tremendous defensive center fielder, which we talked about all season. He's had his injury problems, which is something that, worries me a bit. You go one of those big deals, but he's someone that I thought as soon as, the deal went final with deGrom on Friday, I thought Nimmo should have been a top priority, because now you can pull that money towards him. Obviously, they decided to, in the short term, take some of that, put it towards starting pitching, obviously. But it would be really nice to have him back. You just worry, and same thing. You just worry he doesn't go to someone that could bite you. If he does go outside the division, and you made a good point as far as wanting him to sign sooner than later so the Mets can figure out their plans. deGrom signing so quick was a good thing for the Mets, because they, I know we talked about as far as they weren't going to wait around, and obviously they probably knew more than us and probably had a feeling that he wasn't coming back to begin with. So we're going to start doing that due diligence regardless. But it is nice, you didn't have to wait through after the holidays to January or anything like that. And, optics, I guess, kind of everything. And if the Mets didn't do any big moves, they probably would have gotten blamed saying you waited on deGrom and vice versa. So, I think it's a blessing in disguise for them in that respect, that he did sign early and they could kind of pivot right away and now figure out the rest of their offseason without really, waiting around for him, so to speak.
No, yeah, I think that's a really good point. Obviously it wasn't a positive that deGrom left, but it was a positive that he did it when he did. And that allowed the Mets to immediately turn to Verlander, who they had already shown interest in and was still available. I mean, can you imagine if deGrom signed with the Rangers 2 weeks later and Rodon and Verlander off the market? That really puts the Mets in a position where they're going to be scraping to find a top of the rotation guy. So yeah, timing wise, it certainly worked out for the Mets. And kind of one other note I wanted to mention on Verlander is that, like you talked about, Cohen kind of, again, made his presence felt in recruiting him. He had conversations with him, much like he did with Max Scherzer, much like he did late in the season with Edwin Diaz. And I just think it's an important thing to talk about, just because I know we don't really want to bring up the Wilpons, but just in the simple contrast of where the Mets have gone from an organization where you had Jeff and Fred Wilpon, where no one wanted to hear from them. I mean, whether it was players, agents, fans, media. It was just like, well, let's just keep these guys out of sight, out of mind. And now you have an owner that's literally helping recruit these players come to New York or to stay in New York. And obviously that's a welcome sign for Mets fans. And also let's just talk about the fact that Cohen is willing to give out that kind of money.
Absolutely.
I mean, Jeff Wilpon was kind of famous for saying a couple years ago, well, teams can't, when Bryce Harper was a free agent, well, teams can't have multiple players that are making over 30 million. Well, the Mets have 3 players next year that are going to make over 30 million. So Steve Cohen's, I mean, obviously neither of the first 2 years have finished the way he had hoped or anyone had hoped, but he's putting the money where his mouth is, literally, in signing these contracts, or allowing Billy Epler to put out these contracts, and for him to be able to be on a plus side of bringing players in. And I just think that's important to note for now and to going forward. I'm sure hopefully he gets a chance to sit down with Nimmo and kind of talk to him and see if they can find a common ground too. And it's just good to have an owner that's willing to be involved in that manner, it be a positive for the Mets instead of what it had been previously.
No, 1,000%. And, you know, we've hit on that, I feel like, a bunch over the last year plus at this point. And it just goes to show you, you know, when you show a commitment to, I guess, not only when, I know winning keeps coming up, right, which is a big thing on top of the checkbook, but like just the commitment to his players, as far as trying to get it to know them on a personal level and connect with them as people, right, and family people and that sort of thing. And I think that goes, you know, a long way. You know, obviously, besides the organization and the financial compensation, but you know, it seems like you know, he's putting together a franchise now that's not family run, but that has that family feel, that you know, they have each other's backs, and as far as you know, supporting the players and their endeavors and things like that, it's a good thing. Hopefully it translates to wins, because this window's short. And Cohen's not going to spend like this forever. I don't care what anybody says. Eventually, teams rebuild, and you know, owners don't spend like this crazy. So hopefully, this next couple of year window, hopefully they can win. You know, I appreciate, and kind of putting a bow on it, Cohen's commitment to winning out of the gate. Most owners, they rebuild when they buy teams, right? You know, they break down their assets. They do that sort of thing, you know, as smart businesses do, I guess. But Cohen's in the unique position with his financial stature. He didn't have to do that. So, you know, it is great that he's gone all in, you know, no matter what. Obviously, you can't buy a championship. Anything can happen. We know all that. But it's been a refreshing sight to see. And even when you get a gut punch like Friday with deGrom, the way they pivoted that they did, it's really cool. You just, you know, I hold my breath a little bit, just that it all works out for the best. But, you know, real quick, I guess we should talk about how our old friend Trey Turner's back in the NL East. Could put a bow on that. The Phillies signed him today with 11 years, $300 million to play short for Philly for the next 11 years. So he killed the Mets in Washington. I can't imagine what he's going to do in that little ballpark in Philly, 81 games a year.
Well, and not just that. I mean, the new rules are really geared towards guys being able to steal more bases with the bigger bases and the limited pickoffs. So, yeah, really hoping Trey Turner wasn't going to at least sign in the American League East. But
yeah,
I think the Phillies made it pretty evident early in free agency that was their number one target. That was the guy they wanted to bring in, and that's what they did. I mean,
yeah.
They put out a good contract, and Turner's going to be there for a very long time. It's just, I mean, you're talking about a team that's coming off going to the World Series and a lineup that was very good without Trey Turner.
Right.
It's a tough team to. The Phillies are going to be good for a while.
Yeah.
But I think so. Let's end it on a different note than talking about Trey Turner. Let's talk about the fact that Robert Murray of Fansided reported that the Cardinals could look to James McCann as a backup option if they miss out on Sean Murphy and other catching options. I think that's a really interesting note. I think it was, I can't remember if it was Rosenthal or Sherman recently mentioned that some teams were looking to move some pieces, and James McCann was one of those that was mentioned.
Please
This is
move.
kind of the first. This is one of the first times we've kind of heard a team that would be interested in him. And I mean, look, it makes sense from a Cardinals standpoint. They want a veteran catcher.
Mm-hmm.
James McCann is that. They would like a defensive catcher. James McCann was pretty good defensively last year. Obviously, the Mets, for multiple reasons, would like to move on from McCann. One being that he has 2 years, $24 million left on his contract, and another one is that really big human in Francisco Alvarez. I know I mentioned on here, and we'll probably talk about it more once we get into March and such, but I think there's a really good chance that Francisco Alvarez is on Mets opening day roster in 2023. And I think the Mets would like that to be the case, even if there wasn't an issue with McCann's really poor performance since coming to the Mets. I think Alvarez is just to the point where he's good enough where he's forcing that hand. Yeah. And I mean, obviously I can't imagine the Mets are getting anything of substance back from McCann, but I mean, the biggest thing you're getting by trading McCann is you're getting that roster spot.
Yep.
You're getting that spot so that you don't have to carry 3 catchers to carry Francisco Alvarez early in the year, which I think is huge. I think Alvarez and Nido is a fine combination. Obviously, Alvarez is the offense. That's what he has. I think he potentially going to be one of the best offensive catchers in baseball, and Nito's one of the best defensive catchers in baseball. So for that duo for the Mets, I think that would be a really good shot in the arm. One thing we've talked about numerous times is the Mets adding some offense this offseason, particularly power, and I think that's what Alvarez does.
Yeah.
I mean, him playing 120 games between catcher and DH, there's a really good chance even in that span that he's going to hit 20 home runs, hit 20 doubles. I mean, I don't have a lot of questions about Alvarez and his ability at the major league level. So I think it would be huge for the Mets if they were able to move on from McCann in a deal like that and potentially even dump a little bit of money in one of those deals if they're able to get the Cardinals or another team to take on some cash. And that not only helps there, say you get that team to eat $4 million this year. That's what they were able to sign Adam Ottavino to last year. Right. So I'm not saying you're getting lucky again and getting that great performance from a guy like Ottavino for 1 year, $4 million, but it allows you to go out and get a guy like that with some upside out of the bullpen and kind of saves you where that's less that you are going over the luxury tax. I mean, they're going over the luxury tax. It's just a matter of how much. So, yeah, I think that it'll be an interesting development to watch going forward is if they are able to get the Cardinals and or more teams really interested in McCann.
Yeah, I think the Rangers should have to take James McCann for the rest of his contract. I think if they do that, we'll call it all even, call it square. We'll forget about deGrom. But yeah, any team that's willing to take McCann and any money they're willing to give back for that, I'll drive him to the airport myself. That would be great. Whatever they can get at this point. And again, not a bad dude. Whatever, just didn't work out here. And I totally agree. You don't want to be carrying 3 catchers just to get Alvarez on the roster, which obviously you would do if you had to. But hopefully somebody. And then if you trade him to the Cardinals, maybe it would be bad. That would be great. That would be like a double whammy. So whatever you get there, but. Things are happening. Whatever happens there, we'll keep you updated. I guess real quick, I will say on the All MLB team, Edwin Diaz was on the first MLB team, and Max Scherzer and Francisco Lindor were on second All MLB team. So that was pretty cool. But other than that, I think we have a bow here on everything. We'll keep you updated as the winter meetings go on this week. And if any other major signings happen with the Mets or anywhere else. But until then, guys, let's go Mets.